Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Flying Fluffy Football Dolphins fan talk. So, yeah, it's basically I'll be doing these live streams to talk about Dolphins, the NFL in general, basically any interesting topic that comes to mind related to the NFL. And as we actually get into the start of the season, we'll actually get closer to we'll actually get some more news. Spaceman says, did you hear about Rip Ride Rocket closing? As a matter of fact, I did. Yeah. Ooh. Give me 1 second while I see if I can. I want to adjust the camera so that I can look at the chat while also looking directly into the camera at the same time. It was so much easier. This camera is great. Don't get me wrong, but it was so much easier to be able to look at the chat on the laptop without looking like I'm looking off into the distance on camera. All right. This should be fair enough. So, I guess I should start off by going over I should go over all of the preseason games that happened this past week, as well as all the news stories. Xavier Howard has been named. Xavier Howard just signed with the Colts. So that's the former Dolphin who hasn't been on an active roster in about a year and a half. So it's funny that the Colts, who are also apparently dealing with a rash of cornerback injuries, turned to a former Dolphin, which means go to plan. The Dolphins will be playing against Xavier Howard in week 1 against the Colts. Andrew says hello. Colin says what's up. Yeah, how is everybody doing? Colin says Ollie Gordon might be the guy for third down and short yardage. Oh yeah. From what I've seen from Ollie Gordon, he should be the number 2 running back on the depth chart. Jalen Wright hasn't exactly done anything to impress me. Ollie Gordon seems like the running back we have desperately needed for third down, short yardage, and as essentially a tackle, ability to plow through defenders. He doesn't necessarily have the speed, I suppose, that guys like Achan have. Andrew asks, did we sign Matthew Judon? Matthew Judon. So that's the guy. That's the guy that they hosted for a visit. Apparently, the Athletic reported that the Dolphins are meeting with Matthew Judon and are expected to sign him They're hosting him today. They're hosting him today and are expected to sign him. Judon is still looking for a landing spot after the Falcons did not re-sign him following the 2024 season. So, Judon started 15 games but was a disappointment overall, notching only 5.5 sacks and 7 tackles for a loss in what was supposed to be a bounce-back season following a serious biceps injury in 2023. So the Athletic, as we have quote the Athletic, the Dolphins need good players, especially on defense, and Judon would fit that requirement. Judon, who turned 33 last week, is past his prime but should have enough to be a rotational edge rusher behind Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, and possibly Chop Robinson. So essentially, the Dolphins are banking on yet another slightly past their prime veteran who has been injured in recent seasons and has also not been quite as effective as before. So Collins says also we need 10 more teams in fantasy. I'm not sure if that's how the league works. I think the league will simply start with the draft on August 31st, regardless of how many teams have signed up. There is room for 20 teams. So I guess since I'm trying to dip my toes in the water here and come up with a consistent way to fill up these live streams with as much information and interesting discussion as possible, I guess I should start with simply asking them, what is the Miami Dolphins plan right now? According to ESPN and their base 4-3 defense depth chart, expected starting cornerbacks include Kendall Sheffield, Storm Duck, and Mike Hilton. Essentially, the Dolphins, they lost Artie Burns to a season-ending injury. They lost Kader Kohu to a season-ending injury. They had to sign guys like Mike Hilton and Jack Jones as depth, and now they might have to actually play regular starting minutes. And then, of course, we traded Jalen Ramsey. It is nice to have Minka back, as long as he can step up his game, since from what I heard, he has been disappointing in recent seasons with the Steelers. So the Dolphins won their preseason game. The Dolphins won their preseason against the Lions 2017. And the big story was Zach Wilson and especially Quinn Ewers both rebounding from a rather disappointing preseason week 1 start. Quinn Ewers threw for 2 second-half touchdowns, both to fellow rookie Theo Weiss Jr. And essentially the Dolphins backups showed some promise in a victory over the Lions. Especially it was great to see the Ethan Robinson intercepting the pass to ice the game with 22 seconds left after the Lions had driven to the Miami 13. So, yeah, there's now that football season is almost upon us. There's a lot to talk about. The Browns have named Joe Flacco their Week 1 starter. So it means that Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, Kenny Pickett, and you know who, they're all going to be sitting on the bench. So Joe Flacco is entering his 18th NFL season, and he'll be the starting quarterback for the Browns. And he also apparently will start in the team's preseason finale against the Rams at home on Saturday. Says, hey kid, take the hockey better. Let's see. Here we go. The run defense for the Finns might be decent this year. Well, with all the investment in defensive line, it better be decent, along with getting guys like Minka Fitzpatrick. Talk about a stunner. Trading Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith to the Steelers for Minka Fitzpatrick. So there's 3 players who are still in the middle of very, very messy breakdowns with the contract negotiating. That is a lie. Flying Fluffy Football claiming that if we get 10 likes, Kyle will shave his head. That is a lie. That is a lie. So, Terry McLaurin, Trey Hendrickson, and Micah Parsons. Are any of them going to get paid? Cap for Life says, Kyle, I'm ready to take over this fluffy fantasy league. Yeah, I saw you were among the people who joined. Yeah, the fantasy league should be a lot of fun this year. So Of course, the only thing we have to talk about at the moment as far as actual games is the preseason, most notably the Bears walloped the Bills 38-0. Of course, you have to take into account that the Bears playing their starters and the Bills had their second and third string guys out there for most of the game. Apparently Caleb Williams is looking very good in Ben Johnson's offense, which that was one of the biggest questions for the Bears is could Caleb adjust quickly enough to an entirely new offensive system. Flying Fluffy Football says, "Don't let Kyle draft before you or you are screwed." SoFlo says, "I'm in on the Tyreek Hill bounce back here. Anyone else?" Well, I certainly believe that both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle will bounce back. I actually have more interest in seeing how Jalen Waddle does, seeing as he's the younger player. Colin says, "Team Storm Ducks season is going to win in fantasy." Give me a second. So what other themes have we got going on in the league right now? There are the besides the very hilarious ways in which the Bengals, Cowboys, and I guess Commanders have failed to negotiate with their high-profile athletes. Cap for Life says, "So we got Waller, Sealer, Jalen Phillips, Chan. There's actually two JPs on the team now. You're going to have to be more specific. There's Jalen Phillips, and then I think there's the rookie Jordan Phillips." Flying Fluffy Hockey says, 20 likes and a steal back my Zach Thomas jersey live on. This jersey is mine. Mine. You'll have to find me a Ronnie Brown or Ricky Williams jersey that fits me. I don't know if I'm going to exactly be wanting a Ryan Tannehill jersey anytime soon. Honestly, I'm hoping that the Dolphins give me something to cheer for this season because I want to find a new hero on the team. Like, I already am taking great interest in Ollie Gordon because because running back is something that has been such a dire need for the Dolphins. Seriously, did Alexander Madison really have to get head slammed into the ground and undergo season-ending neck surgery after the first preseason game? I heard from all accounts he was having a good training camp. So right now, the Flying Fluffy Football League, I can share the screen here. Colin says the new hero is Chop Robinson or A-Chan. A-Chan has been highly entertaining. Let's see. So I'll show you guys who is in the Flying Fluffy Football League right now. You have Jaws. You have Storm Duck Season, managed by Colin. Cocoa Beach Raw Dogs, managed by Trey. Tua Turn the Ball Over, managed by Andrew. And then Rosado's Astounding Team. Take a wild guess who that team is managed by. The Lord's Advents, managed by Steven. Droid. Icy is here. My team is Jaws Jr.'s Jackrabbits. And Jaws is supposed to get me a picture of one of the bunnies in our yard. And I want that as my team logo. And then there's Cap for Life. So what does that make? That makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. There's still 10 available spaces here. There's still 10 available spaces here. Patel Ron says, woohoo! Kyle getting back to work. Pacharo, I did hear the Dolphins are trying to sign Matthew Judon. And I immediately read the Athletic article, and yet he's yet another slightly past his prime veteran who has suffered an injury from a couple seasons ago and has had a downturn in production, but on paper, he could be one of the best defensemen on the team. SoFlo says, I think A-Chan will have a top 5 finish and Tyreek has a top 10 finish. Waddle gets injured week 1. So Pacharo says, Jaws, could we see Bradley Chubb get traded for a corner? I don't know. I think Bradley Chubb might be one of the players the Dolphins kept on purpose for their culture reset. Patalron asks, is Darren Waller going to play? By all accounts, he will be at least up and running by week 1. I mean, he is projected to be the starting tight end after all. SoFlo says Chubb has 0 value right now. Yeah. I don't think the Dolphins have to make a trade to get a corner. Last I heard, both Rasul Douglas and Asante Samuel were out there for the taking. Rasul Douglas is a free agent. Asante Samuel Jr. Asante Samuel Jr., I believe, is also a free agent. So there are perfectly good cornerbacks to get. Let's see. Let me pull up Asante. Let me I am going to I'm going to pull up the stats for both Asante Samuel Jr. and for Rasul Douglas. And let's see if we can make a comparison. Although, with it being so close to the start of the season, I have no idea if the Dolphins even plan on signing any more players. Okay. Let's see. Pacharo says, Mike McDaniel just said signing Matthew Judon has nothing to do with injury concerns. Well, Matthew Judon strikes me as essentially another linebacker to try and bolster the defense. Of course, it is not official whether he has been signed yet or not. Austin says hello. Colin says probably could see some signings after they make cuts and stuff to the roster. Yeah, the Dolphins are still sorting through the guys they pulled off the street and say, "Hey, want to play cornerback?" to see if any of them have the potential to crack the starting roster. My prediction is most likely the Dolphins are going to stick with Storm Duck being one of the starting corners, and then maybe sign a different corner to go alongside him, because our only other options are guys like Kendall Sheffield or Mike Hilton or Jack Jones. Or if you want to throw the 5th round pick Jason Marshall Jr. into the gauntlet, they could always do that. Patel Ron says, bring back Cam. Wait, he could still go. Joe Kerr asks, wonder why they want another pass rusher than not a corner. Yeah, what is the Dolphins' plan with corner? You might as well call the defense a circle, because I don't see any corners. I see a duck, and I see SoFlo with a couple of bold predictions. Well, at least one bold prediction. Jahmyr Gibbs will be the top back this year. That's a very bold prediction. You're talking about, let alone league, you're talking about in the same conference. You have Saquon. Across the league you have Saquon. You have Derrick Henry. If things break right for Achane, I don't know about number 1, but I think Achane might sneak his way into top 5. You also don't know. Ashton Genty is one of my favorite new players to keep an eye on, because I've heard about how he's a legitimate monster on running back, and it's a shame the NFL apparently the Raiders discouraged him from using his infamous Michael Myers stance. Patel wants his trade for Hendrickson. Only if he can play cornerback. It sucks. There's 2 big, shiny, premium defensive players whose teams have actively tried to piss them off. But they're both defensive ends, and the Dolphins are chock full of defensive ends. Patel Ron says Genty played at Boise State, didn't have a tough schedule. SoFlo says in terms of PPR fantasy points. Which is why you also think Deebo Samuel ends this year with wide receiver 1 numbers also. Well, he is playing with Jaden Daniels, so there's that. But Deebo strikes me as a player who is perhaps no longer in his prime and might be relegated to wide receiver 2 in that system, if they would actually pay Terry McLaurin, that is. So, Colin says, I love Genty. Dude is a gamer out there despite playing with the Raiders O-line. Big fan of his game, yeah. The Raiders might actually have a competent offense. They actually have a running back, and they have a quarterback. I mean, Geno Smith is not the most inspired choice out there, but getting to reunite with a 73-year-old Pete Carroll can't go terribly wrong, can it? Let's see. I went over the Pro Football Reference. So Asante Samuel Jr., he's actually younger than me. He was born the same year, but later that year. He'll be 26 this October. So last year he only started 4 games. I have to assume that was due to injuries. And he's had 6 interceptions over the past 4 years. He has 1 fumble recovery. He's had 176 combined tackles, including at least 40 tackles in each of the last 3 seasons before 2024. So what is Asante Samuel Jr. like what would be called a prospect in the if he were an NHL player? These numbers aren't exactly And then you have, give me a second. Which one is it still showing? Here's Rasul Douglas. He's obviously older. He's closing in on 30. He's spent the last 2 seasons with the Bills, in which he recorded 4 interceptions in 23, but none last year. And he's combined in the past 2 years total for a total of 87 tackles and 664 of those were on his own. So from what I'm seeing, I have to catch up with my knowledge of all these players, but Rasul Douglas seems like the proven veteran. He's had 19 interceptions over his career, 3 of them returned for touchdowns. Asante has only had 6 interceptions. So, given how badly the Dolphins need corners, how about you just pick Asante Samuel Jr. for no other reason? He's the younger player. I guess what I would want to know is injury history, how reliable both of them have been as starters. Andrew says, who is our starting corners right now? According to ESPN's 4-3 defense depth chart, it would be Kendall Sheffield, Storm Duck, and Mike Hilton playing the near corner. So, funnily, it's funny that you should mention points per reception fantasy, SoFlo. This is the first time I think that at least I've played in a points per reception league. I am used to a standard fantasy league where every 10 rushing or receiving yards nets you 1 point. You get a point for every 25 passing yards. And you also get 6 points for a touchdown. It's going to work a little differently for me. I now have to figure out not just who I think is going to have the best performances in the game, but who's going to have most receptions. Patel Ron says, bring back Sam Madison and Pat Surtain. They could still go. SoFlo says, J.J. McCarthy breaks out. Colin says, I really wish that the Finns had drafted Will Johnson out of Michigan. He has been dominating in camp and preseason for the Cardinals. SoFlo says, I haven't played standard in years. Well, I don't know if I've ever played points per reception before. Like, what was it that I saw? The scoring? I guess for those of you in the fantasy league, I guess it should be a good time to go over the settings. So, scoring, it's head-to-head points per reception. The roster size is 16, which is absurd compared to the standard league. 9 total starters, 7 on the bench with one injured reserve. You mean I can hold a player on injured reserve. That's crazy. So there's quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, flex. So here's the scoring. Apparently in this Flying Fluffy Football League, for every passing yard, you only get 0.04 points, which I guess means it makes so little sense to me because I'm used to all of the numbers, in the standard scoring. It's all whole numbers. You don't have 0.0 anything. So what is that? Okay. Now it's starting to, now that I'm actually doing the math, it actually is not that dissimilar. 0.04 points per passing yards means simply that it is once again 1 point for every 25 passing yards. Although it's only 4 points for a passing touchdown. 2-point passing conversion is 2 points. Interceptions -2. Rushing yards. Okay, so now it makes sense. The scoring it really is apparently mostly the same. As it was at standard, except now you're actually rewarded for the small fractions of increments less than 25 or 10, whereas in a standard league, let's say Matthew Stafford throws for 374 yards. Well, you're only getting, let's see. In the standard league, that would be 4, 8, 12. You're only getting 14. You're not getting 15. But now you would be getting closer to 14.9 or something. 14.9 in the points per reception league, which means all those tiny fractions actually count for something. I guess that's enough of me trying to relearn a fantasy league on the fly. It is my intention that I am essentially in charge of the content for the football channel for the most part now. So basically, both Jaws and I will be streaming all the Dolphins games and however many other games that we interest us. And we also will have the fantasy league going, and Jaws will help me out to basically post the results from each week. Random aside, another rookie that I think a lot of people are highly anticipating is Travis Hunter, a man with the potential to become the Shohei Ohtani of football. Patel Ron says, I don't trust former Jets players, yet the Dolphins keep signing players like Ray Lucas, Mike White, and now Zach Wilson. Why? Touchdown. Points per reception. So in this league, you essentially get 1 point for every 10 reception yards, but you also get 1 point every time the player makes a reception. So it means instead of just getting 1 point when a player makes a 10-yard catch, you get 2. Now I wonder over the long run, I wonder if the strategy remains to get the players that you believe will be catching the longest passes and the most touchdowns, or if you also have to take into consideration if you have a player that every now and again makes a ridiculously huge touchdown catch, but then he only has like 5 other receptions the whole day. I'm sure I'll figure it out. Neil says, just stopping by to say hi, Kyle. Glad you guys are still doing this. God bless. Hey, thank you, Neil. That's much appreciated. Yeah. Yeah, I am more or less going to be the one in charge of the Dolphins content. Collins says, I think Cam Ward is going to be good for the Titans. You're also kind of surprised how little people are talking about Cam Ward. SoFlo says, so in your personal rankings, you should have true wide receiver ones at your highest. That's why Jamar Chase is ranked number 1 on ESPN. There were games last year where Amon-Ra St. Brown had like 13. I drafted Amon-Ra St. Brown, and rarely did I regret that because he did so well for me in the majority of the games. Pass catching running backs get a boost too. So, I recognized last year from my last year's fantasy league, my drafting strategy was more or less sound. I took a quarterback early on, and by no means did I regret which quarterback I took, because I took probably one of the best fantasy quarterbacks I could have had. But I also had to scramble to find a decent running back too. And I don't want to make that same mistake again. Because it wasn't until I made a trade in the middle of my league season, someone wanted my shiny Brian Thomas Jr. and he was willing to give me what's the name of the running back for the Packers? The Packers starting running back. Josh Jacobs, yeah. The dude gave me Josh Jacobs for Brian Thomas Jr. straight up, and I had no problems with running backs. Colin says, don't give Kyle advice. Got to keep the secrets, especially during the draft. SoFlo says, Dolphins Jarvis Landry was a points per reception monster. He used to go as early as round 2, simply because Tannehill would check it down to him at least 5 times a game. Yeah, well, my strategy with the draft as always will be to simply figure out the best player that's fallen into my lap and take advantage. Like, I would tell you which players I had from my fantasy team last year, but I don't want any of you all getting ideas. I'd rather see the looks on my dad's face when I steal the player he wants for the 6th time in a row. It's no joke. At least half a dozen times in last year's fantasy draft, my dad audibly was swearing because I had just taken a player that he wanted, and he was forced to scramble for whatever was there. SoFlo says that's what I did with Neighbors last year. Fell right into my lap in the back half of round 3. Couldn't pass up on him even though he was an unproven rookie. Did well for me. Yeah, well, I ended up drafting Brian Thomas Jr., and it was only because the Jaguars sucked so much especially in the early part of the season, where I was willing to part with Brian Thomas Jr. because I had probably the best receiving room in the entire league, or close to it. And I needed a running back. I needed a running back desperately, so I traded Brian Thomas Jr. for Josh Jacobs. It wasn't even me that initiated the trade. 2 different people in my fantasy league wanted Brian Thomas Jr., and I ended up making the 1-for-1 deal, and it worked out really well for both of us. Like, it's always intriguing trying to gauge how rookies will do, because they're often going to the worst teams. Like, Cam Ward has hardly been talked about because the Titans, I wouldn't say the Titans have exactly done anything special to support the dude. Travis Hunter is going to be highly intriguing, and I have to imagine Travis Hunter will be taken in a lot of first rounds. Or how about that that kicker in the preseason who just made a 70-yard field goal. That dude is going to be the first drafted kicker in like 9 out of 10 drafts. Because apparently in a points per reception league, you're actually rewarded further if the kick is from 50 yards or from 60 plus yards. Cam Little. Yeah. In the standard fantasy league, you get 3 points for a field goal, 5 points if it's a 50-plus yarder. But in this points per reception league, you lose a point for every field goal is missed. From 0 to 39 yards. 0 to 39 yards, it's 3 points. From 40 to 49 yards, it's 4 points. From 50 to 59 yards, it's 5 points. And from 60 plus yards, it's 6. Now, why on earth is a touchdown pass only worth 4 points in the points per reception league? It was worth 6 in standard. A touchdown reception is still worth 6. A touchdown rush is worth 6. Kickoff return touchdown, punt return touchdown, fumble recovered for a touchdown, interception return touchdown, fumble returned touchdown, blocked punt or field goal return for touchdown. Those are all worth 6 points. Kickoff return touchdown. So why is the quarterback? I get nerfing how many points you get for passing yards, but touchdown pass, seriously? So yeah. Colin says, I think the Texans and Bills got some good wide receiver rooms, in my opinion. Well, the Bills, as always, should remain a contender in the AFC. I would be shocked if they did not get that division handed to them on a silver platter for the however many years in a row it's been. And since the Texans play in the AFC South, that division is pretty much theirs to lose without question. Of all the divisions in the AFC, it's actually the AFC West that I think is most up for grabs. Colin says, I also think that the Patriots will finish in second place this year in the division. Ugh. I mean, it's entirely possible. Like, the Dolphins, Patriots, and Jets are all in various stages of either trying to rebuild or retool or form themselves back into contenders. Adonis says, hi, guys. What's up? Sorry I missed the noon stream. Well, thank you for joining the Dolphins stream, where we've been mostly just talking about fantasy and maybe the occasional mention of certain players that we think might do well this upcoming season. Oh, I need football back so badly. And apparently, the Patriots are willing to trade a top draft pick to help the team because the Patriots have so much cap space. It's ridiculous. Let's see. Apparently, Devon Achan will likely miss this week of practice, Mike McDaniel said today, as he works his way back from a calf injury. He missed the second day of last week's joint practice with the Lions and did not play in the preseason game. So McDaniels confirms it was a soft tissue injury and clarify it was his calf. McDaniel was quoted as saying he's an explosive athlete. Calves are the ones that you have to be super proactive, especially with explosive players. We don't want to have a long, strenuous, nagging issue. So we probably won't see Devon this week after further assessment through this past weekend. But that's more preventative in nature just because all trainers across the league have horror stories with calves if you're too aggressive coming back. The Dolphins will host the Jaguars for one joint practice this week ahead of their preseason finale Saturday. Sealer also missed Miami's second joint practice with the Lions, but is expected to return to practice this week. This week may also mark the debut of tight end Darren Waller, who was placed on the physically unable to perform list before the start of training camp. The Dolphins saw two of their outside linebackers suffer injuries over the past 2 weeks. Jalen Phillips missed both joint practices last week, while Chop Robinson was carted off the field Wednesday, though he returned to practice the following day. Miami hosted four-time Pro Bowl outside linebacker Matthew Judon on Monday, but McDaniel said the visit was not related to any potential long-term injuries to any of the team's linebackers. Adonis says, not lying, but I think that Tyrone Tracy could be good for fantasy since he's going to start most games and can rack up lots of yards. Well, if you're talking Giants players, I'd say Malik Neighbors should be still a coveted target in fantasy. Russell Wilson is probably going to be relegated to reserve quarterback in a bunch of leagues. Austin, both Jaws and I are doing Dolphin streams. Sophos does HN calf strain. Adonis says, I'm rewatching game 2 of this year's Cup final. and just saw the legendary helicopter stick play by Forsling. That's nice. Do I see the Colts game being an easy win for Miami? It's hard. It's really hard to put enough trust in the Dolphins to say any game is an easy win, but the Colts are going to be starting either Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones as their quarterback. Frankly, losing to the Colts in week 1 should be considered completely unacceptable. Because the Dolphins, if the Dolphins can't muster up an offense, if the Dolphins can't muster up either a defense that can stop Danny Derps or Anthony Richardson, or an offense that can outduel one of those guys, it would not bode well for the rest of the season when we have to go play teams like the Commanders, Ravens, Bengals. But I am going to be optimistic and say, yeah, I think the Dolphins should get the W in week 1. I mean, they got the win in week 1 last year against the Jaguars, a ridiculously close, nail-biting game against a team that turned out to completely suck. But still. So, which one do you think is the bigger lolcow for getting all of the other stuff that these two gentlemen have done, just focusing on their contract negotiating with one player? Is Mike Brown or Jerry Jones the bigger idiot? Mike Brown is refusing to give Trey Hendrickson, their star defensive player and one of 3 guys that all wanted paydays after having paid the other 2 guys. He's refusing to give Hendrickson more than a 1-year guarantee. And Jerry Jones has botched the Micah Parsons situation so badly that now Micah wants to be traded. Like, I know Jerry Jones is a special breed of hilarious when it comes to literally costing his team $100 million combined between all the money he burnt through dragging out negotiations with guys like CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. But being in Mike Brown's shoes, knowing that the Bengals desperately need anything they can get for defense and refusing to give a guy who led the league in sacks last year more than a 1-year guarantee also sounds pretty odd. Joe says Jerry does this every year. He'll end up signing Micah. It will just be higher than it should be. The Bengals might actually lose Trey. Oh, Hendrickson, if only you could play corner. I would not object to getting a guy who led the league in sacks last year. But the Dolphins really, really need another body to throw at the corner position. I think defensive line is fine for the Dolphins. If I go back to the depth chart, let me see if I can pull up the depth chart. So this is ESPN, so take the info with a bit of a grain of salt if you must. This is the Dolphins depth chart. So here's the 3 wide receiver, 1 tight end depth chart. You have Tua starting quarterback. Zach Wilson most likely is getting backup duty just because he has experience. Quinn Ewers is third string and he impressed against the Lions. A-Chan is starting running back. I do not agree. I do not agree with Jalen Wright being here in second. It should be Ollie Gordon. Ollie Gordon should be backup. And then Mike Boone is some fourth string cheese. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Nick Westbrook-Ikine, Darren Waller, if he'll actually play, Alec Ingold, Patrick Paul, Jonah Zavaina, Aaron Brewer, James Daniels, and Austin Jackson. Thank God Liam Eichenberg does not have the starting job anymore at left guard. Thank the Lord. And here is the defense. Chop Robinson, defensive edge. Zach Sealer, Benito Jones, Bradley Chubb, Jordan Brooks, Tyrell Dodson, Jalen Phillips, Kendall Sheffield, Ashton Davis, Minka Fitzpatrick, Storm Duck, and Mike Hilton. Compared to the defense from last year, wow, that's a lot of damage. No Ramsey. And I know there's other guys not there anymore. No Calais Campbell. Teron Armstead, of course, retired, and now it's a big hole to fill in the offensive line. Adonis says, I don't think both Terry and Parsons are leaving their teams. They'll get deals done. Look at Myles Garrett, who is one of the most consistent players in the league, and he wanted out, but he still stayed. Here's the thing. Myles Garrett got thrown $40 million a year to stay in Cleveland. And while Jerry can and probably will throw Micah a gross overpayment compared to what the original salary would have been if he had just negotiated, I don't know if I could say the same for Mike Brown and Trey Hendrickson. Friendly reminder, the Bengals don't have a GM. Duke Tobin has been their director of player of personnel since 1999, but they have no actual GM. So So of all the guys on this defense, who would you say are the most clearly reliable starters? Like Bradley Chubb, obviously, Minka Fitzpatrick, Zach Sealer has been a beast for a long time. But besides those three, do any of these guys, I guess Jalen Phillips counts as a solid starter. Do the Dolphins actually have anything anything here built up that is better than the Bengals defense. Because even if Tua is out there putting up similar staggering numbers while throwing to Tyreek and to Waddle, even if Devon Achane and Ollie Gordon terrorize the AFC East with their own version of Sonic and Knuckles, it won't matter if the defense is as porous as the Bengals. Can you guys read? I'll make it a little bigger so in case you wanted to read the names of this defense. So that there you have it. That's the defense. Let's see. Give me a second. There we go. So the Bengals are apparently listening to Trey Hendrickson trade offers. According to Cincy Jungle, the Cincinnati Bengals community on SB Nation, the Bengals turned down a second round pick for Trey Hendrickson, according to the NFL Network. The team now reportedly wants a player in return. The Bengals turned down, quote, a second round pick and change for Hendrickson before the 2025 NFL draft. They were, according to the insider, holding out for a first rounder. That was months ago. At this point, the Bengals would want a player, somebody who could maybe even replace some of the production they got from Trey Hendrickson, as well as a pick in the 2026 draft. The Athletic's Diana Rossini reported that the Bengals are looking for a young defensive player and a 2026 first-round pick. Collins says, I saw a rumor that Washington is listening to trade offers for Brian Robinson Jr., the running back. Interested to see where he goes. Maybe the Texans will trade for him. Now, why would they want to trade Brian Robinson Jr.? I thought he did good for them last year. Unless there's another pressing need in Washington that they're trying to fill.
So it'll be very interesting to see if the Dolphins do end up signing Matthew Judon, as I suppose that is the biggest Dolphins related news story right now, that they want to sign him. Does McDaniel expect anybody to believe that the team is not potentially signing Matthew Judon out of concerns for potential long-term injuries? Like, I mean, Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips come to mind as guys who suffered devastating injuries in the past couple seasons. Surely having one more linebacker in the room of a guy who of the caliber of Matthew Judon, that should help. Oh, here we are. CBS Sports. Commanders Brian Robinson Jr. will not play versus the Bengals as trade speculation ramps up. This is apparently a mutual decision between Robinson and Washington. Robinson is set to enter the final year of his rookie contract. He rushed 187 times for a career high 799 yards and 8 touchdowns in 2024. While Robinson was Washington's lead running back over Austin Eckler, Jeremy McNichols, and Chris Rodriguez Jr., rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels was the Commanders' leading rusher with 891 yards and 7 touchdowns. So I guess the Commanders might be trading Brian Robinson Jr. after all. And where do you think he ends up? Which teams out there are hungry for a running back? Oh, this should be funny. I'll share this because this is pretty funny. The 2025 fantasy football mock draft. So these are all. So these are the ESPN fantasy team of writers and editors got together for a 12-team fantasy football mock draft with PPR scoring. So in their draft, Ashton Genty, a rookie, got drafted 5th overall before guys like Saquon and Christian McCaffrey. I know people might be riding high on the Ashton Genty train, but I doubt he is going to get chosen over guys like Saquon or CMC so easily. So what was this? Round one. Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, Justin Jefferson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Ashton Genty, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, Puka Nacua, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brian Thomas Jr. So the first Dolphins player was picked at the start of round 2, Devon Achane, Jonathan Taylor, A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Nico Collins, Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, Drake London, Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Ladd McConkey. Round 3, Kyron Williams, James Cook, Lamar Jackson, T. Higgins, Jaden Daniels, Marion Hampton, Kenneth Walker, 3rd, Tyreek Hill, Josh Allen, Devontae Adams, Alvin Kamara, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, Chuba Hubbard, George Kittle, James Conner, Marvin Harrison Jr., Xavier Worthy, Terry McLaurin, Trayvon Henderson, DeAndre Swift, Mike Evans, David Montgomery. How many rounds did this go for? Good grief. Yeah, I don't need to read all that. All right, well, I'm down to the last few minutes here. So I guess with everything being mostly quiet as far as preseason goes, Wattenbor says, who is your favorite Dolphins player? Are you talking from this current team? Or from teams of Dolphins past? Like my favorite player from this Dolphins team right now, probably either Devon Achane or Jalen Waddle. I love the Waddle celebration. I love how fast Achane is. Last year was disappointing because none of the Dolphins were really at full power. Once Tua went down, it just all fell into chaos. So, one of my favorite memories from recent years is the scoring 70 points against the Broncos, where both Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane both had 5 touchdowns for a total of 10 combined rushing touchdowns. Or at least I think that's what I remembered. The Dolphins are about to make final cuts soon. Yeah, what is the deadline for 53-man roster deadline? So the 53-man roster deadline is at 4 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. And good news, I will be streaming while that deadline comes and goes. So all right. Well, versus good picks, love H-Chan, hope we get healthy. Okay. Well, I think I'm gonna go ahead and sign off now. And yeah, I'll be live again tomorrow at 3. And it means I will be streaming while the 53-man roster deadline is approaching. Okay. Thank you all for joining us. And it's much appreciated that you spent an hour and a half this afternoon with me. Joker says, my favorite memory of the McDaniel era is when we got that sack, fumble, scoop, and score on Josh Allen in that playoff game, even though we lost. Yeah, that pretty much is the high right there. Taking the lead in that wild card game when Skylar Thompson was our starting quarterback. Now I'd just take beating the Bills again, let alone beating them in the playoffs. So yeah, all right. I'll see you guys next afternoon, and yeah, fins up. Thank you for joining, and hopefully some more interesting stuff goes on tomorrow as the 53-man roster deadline approaches. Okay. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.